Hey everyone, welcome again to the Generative Sales and Marketing Show, where we talk about how product sales and marketing come together to reinvent profits, costs, and revenue streams. I've got my partner in crime here, Tom. I'm your host, Adam Bloom. This is Series 1. We're still in Series 1, Episode 6, which is about Chapter 6 in the book. And I will say, every show has a theme that we start off with. While the book has this red and blue theme, which is an example, red and blue pill, of using generative AI to repeat themes or concepts or characters in each show episode or video podcast episode. We introduce a new theme just for the episode. And Tom, can you see this one?
Yeah, I really prefer not to, but yes, it has everything that I don't.
Right. A cute furry nose, whiskers, and a lot of hair.
There we go.
Who doesn't love an adorable bunny? It's funny. I was thinking the afro is one of the most iconic hairstyles of recent history. My dad actually had one in the late 60s, early 70s. But we're going to dedicate this show to cute bunnies with afros or other pretty cool similar hairstyles. In any event, this one is going to be called Poppin', with product marketing, product-led growth, and generative-led growth. All right, so that's the theme throughout the show. Has a lot to do with the book's chapter and whatnot. And we always like to start off. This is a dedication to my daughter. I dedicated the book to her. Whoop, that's supposed to be that heart's mangled. I can't do a mangled heart for her. In any event, book's dedicated to her, and of course, each show, I'm teaching her generative AI because her generation is going to live in that world. In any event, I also like to start a show with gratitude. I always say I'm appreciative of everyone I've ever worked with in business who has taught me something. I've paid attention to so many people to learn things where they probably weren't even aware that I was studying them. But if we make you laugh and learn, please repost, please share us, and we are grateful for that. So Tom tells me he always breathes heavy and slow, which I get. But for this show, we're going to start with inhaling the good. All right, let's keep going. So really quick, let me introduce Tom. If you want to learn more about his business, very high-end consultant advisor, just plethora of knowledge. He and I have been working and discussing generative AI for 20 months or so, which is how long I've been focused in the field. And if you want to find out more about this AI-driven business growth consulting and advisory, you can go visit the website or email Tom. All right, Tom, welcome back to the show. I want to start off with something a little funny, and I'm going to go ahead and rearrange us how I do sometimes. Let's see. Can we get it side by side? Whoop, go back. So I've been testing comedy for a while now. One, I think business needs more humor. Brands with humor, I think people appreciate. It's harder to pull off, particularly in B2B. B2C, it's a lot easier. But in this case, I said, tell me 3 jokes, and I named 3 older comedians. I think Dangerfield was like 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then you got Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy, right? I think most everybody knows these two. So Rodney Dangerfield, I'll tell you, I get no respect. The other day I bought a summary plot, and the guy said, there goes the neighborhood. Sounds like a good Rodney Dangerfield joke. Robin Williams, you know the difference between a tornado and a marriage? He's so fast. Hey, you know the difference between a tornado and a marriage? Nothing. They both begin with a lot of sucking and blowing, and in the end, you lose your house. That actually sounds like a real Robin Williams joke. Like, it's slightly off color without being terribly obvious. right? And then Eddie Murphy, you can pause and read that one. We'll keep going. But I thought it did a pretty doggone good job of coming across as those personas. So what do you think?
I think I should use those personas a little bit more in my own writing. Um,
All right. So quick funny
the
part. Yep.
yes, the engineer in me and the good analyst realizes that humor is often lacking in my content, and I really I should make an
I
effort to include some of it.
I was thinking, let me get my water here. I was thinking of you earlier today as I was preparing for the show, of course, and I was like, I feel like you're a value engineer. You know, you've got the engineer persona down, right? In any event, to move on to, this YouTube.
And you're moving right into the non-funny part now too.
Yes, I am. Well, this is amazing though. So Bill Gates is got a newer show called Unconfuse Me, and I'm watching the show, and on the other side of the show is Sam Altman. Okay, so he has Sam Altman as a guest, and obviously it's well produced. But at some point, Sam Altman is talking about Moore's Law and how it compares to the generative era, right? And what he says as they flip to Bill Gates, what Sam Altman says is what we're actually seeing is results way better than Moore's Law. And Bill Gates, like, his eyes get big. I didn't capture it perfectly, but in this part of the discussion, I remember his jaw just drops. He's like, and if you see Bill Gates talking about technology and the person on the show makes him drop his jaw, you are witnessing something very profound. I'll just leave it at that. So at the heart of this show, and I want to bring up is my whiteboard working? No.
And Adam, before you move off that point, Bill Gates has talked quite a bit in the past about how Moore's law just fueled the inevitability of the computing revolution that we've seen in our lifetimes. It's without it, none of it could have happened, and it was the foundation on which what we've come to know as modern society has grown, and that he refers to it in that respect. So when you bring it up this way, just given Bill's past history and way of viewing things,
Yeah.
I think we are looking at something that has the potential to do a lot more than that in a lot quicker time frame.
Yeah. I actually just sent you a link about what Google released on proteins in the human genome. There's like a middle language model or something. But the main point of this show is going to be, if this is your customer, and the internal view, I guess, is often that if this is the customer, that you're going to deliver, and we go this way, you're going to deliver some app to them, and you're going to start to measure it. And then you're going to start to analyze it, and you're going to decide to take certain actions. Then you're going to prepare those actions and do them. This is planning actions to improve your app. And the companies, kind of in here, different departments, whether it's sales or marketing or whatever, are doing their own version of this. And again, this is when we had like transactional data and traditional databases and traditional CRM apps that have now, the CRM's been around more than 25 years now. It's probably closer to 30 years. But in the customer life cycle, the customer's view of it, keep drawing this in a weird way. Anyway, there's some kind of marketing, there's some kind of sales, there's some kind of order, right? Then there's some kind of post-sales service and checking in with, are they being successful? And then hopefully you get some kind of upsell, say you're getting customer lifetime value. And what's going to happen is, as the customer goes through this, again, this is more the internal view, whether this is sales or marketing or product and what have you, customer success. Now this layer is going to be a generative layer. And where in this you've had the website, and maybe you talk to a person, and maybe there is a self-serve order management system and customer support. We tend to focus on the technology industry, but it really applies to any industry because every industry is now technology enabled. And we tend to focus a bit on B2B, but we've also got plenty of B2C experience. And again, this whole thing, and you're seeing the thought leaders do it, becomes this generative AI layer, because it is not friction. It reduces friction. It makes your company look a heck of a lot smarter. So we're going to dive into this, and we're going to talk about things. This is one of my favorite chapters because it's so core to all the product marketing work I've done. But we're going to show a bit about how you can take a whole messaging framework and start to build it as the foundation of a well-curated, high-quality curated small language model, which is what we talk a lot about on this show. And that just means how do you feed this information into a small language model on top of Gen AI, which uses a large language model to produce all the stuff on the prior page. So this is one of my favorite slides, actually. I've been developing this, over years and just extended it, but none of it is rocket science. It's just the main elements of messaging, which honestly, a lot of people don't get. Even a lot of marketers don't really get. Only the best of the best are those who have really studied it. So with that said, we also talk about this being step one, where people are kind of playing with this, and this is where everybody says, oh, we're doing generative AI. And then, Tom, we get to step 10, which, again, if I move this is doing generative AI. Any quick 30-second comment on this? I usually comment on it, but as we're going into this show and really getting into how people automate sales and marketing teams, what do you think the main, and product really, what do you think the main focus for them to keep in context based on the book is between step 1 and step 10? You have a thought we haven't covered yet?
Just the process for engineering the content that goes into a small language model, the curation of that on an ongoing basis as opposed to a one-time activity, and viewing that as a corporate asset, which if you curate it and feed it appropriately, it leverages a whole lot of value throughout the organization. So that creation and maintenance type process around the knowledge base, not depicted in this particular slide, in which most people don't even think about or get. That's really the leverage point to make this stuff happen.
Yeah, and let's just unpack that for a second. Because that's a really good point. We haven't talked about it like that, but basically every one of these could have a small language model, or at a department level, right? And this might be a micro language model. Actually, this could be an individual's language model in marketing, like the email marketer. And then eventually they're going to get together with some other marketer, and maybe they can figure out how to get their bots to talk. And so then you get at a department level, and it's a whole different concept. That's where you really do have to think about structuring this across a department where there's a single language model that's being managed, and then you can start to do it, across the whole customer experience. So how do you know where you are with step 1 and step 10? Well, these are not all, but one of our points on a prior show is that, people will list, oh, this is the perfect method, and there's like 5 things. And so you can even ask ChatGPT, what are all the things to consider, and you'll get different answers. But this is a pretty And these spaces don't mean anything. These are not organized in groups, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 42. So these are 42 concepts. And when I talk to people about generative AI, here's how you know whether or not they're really doing it. Can they explain each one of these boxes just off the top of their head? I don't even know that I can. No, I can.
Here's the thing, Adam. Even if you can explain it, the question is how many really are being used or brought in. You don't expect to use them all the time,
No.
but the point of it is these are considerations which should be considered if you are using it more than just individually in an ad hoc basis.
Yep. Yep. So this hopefully gives people a perspective between step 1 and step 10. And then, Tom, I'm about to introduce the episode overview, but I want to go back to this real quick. And
You got to put that hair thing in front of me, don't you?
I do. Sorry. You're feeling chipper this morning.
Yeah.
I'm actually I'm actually going to get you a show branded the next time I do something with an afro. I think I'm going to get you a show branded like Chevy Chase wore in one of those old movies, where it was Fletch, right? He was 6'10" with the afro or something, but that was funny.
Yeah.
I want you
Yeah.
to give this, I want us to have a real quick dueling name challenge. Who comes up with the best name for each bunny? So, what's this bunny? First name, last name.
I, I call it an object of desire, but that sounds a
That's
little,
not a name. All right, I'm
yeah.
gonna go. Whoop! Oh, come on. This
When you
thing.
give it a name, it personifies in a way which tends to,
Okay, I'm gonna go with Frode instead of Fred. Bunnyberg. No, not Bunnyberg. Frode Bunny Hair. There you go. That's a good name, Frode Bunny Hair. You don't have one? All right, you'll get the next one. All right, so we're gonna introduce. I love putting you on the spot. We're gonna introduce. Here's what's in the episode. We've got the fast chapter recap. And what do you think about this one? That's an impressive illustration, isn't it? I'm so proud of this
one,
illustration that I made.
one of my one of my customers is well, the market share leader for internal combustion engine motorcycles,
Oh,
and um, they they probably would well, they would find this amusing. They would never use it.
who knows? Maybe they want to sell, bunny baskets to, you could carry a bunny around there. Or, maybe they market to people who are big fans of bunnies and they have the bunny version of the motorcycle or whatever it is. Anyway, come on, quick name. We got to bounce to the next segment.
All right.
Do you have one? Can you come up with one on the top of your head? Here, we'll do one together. Who was the person in, what was it? The old, I don't know if it was 50s or 60s. There was a famous actor who was part of a gang. And, what's his name? I'm sorry, folks. I've got to look this up now. 50s actor, motorcycle, gang movie. It was it was an outlaw biker, Easy Rider. Easy Rider. Oh, you know who's in Easy Rider? Dennis Hopper. So this will be this thing. This will be let's say I think it's a girl. I do. So instead of Dennis, we're gonna go with Denise. This is Denise Hopper. All right.
Denise is looking a little rough there. That's all.
I think she looks pretty awesome. I mean, that hairdo is off the charts. Anyway, so next slide, quick book promotion. Yo, Tom, again, I want you to guess who this is. This is a different language than pure English. It's kind of a dialect. All right, this is Snoop Dogg dialect. And what it means is you can guess because it's based on English, but it's free download of the book at my website where you can get it for free. And then we're going to have LinkedIn and YouTube stuff. Please follow, subscribe, notify, comment. But most of all, challenge us, ask us questions, send us questions, topics to cover, things like that. We love covering it. And then again, goal of this is to help business leaders improve outcomes. You got the business side, but we think the developer side or the tech side is going to be very interested in well. And then goal number 2 is to go on this journey together. It is a profound change. We've talked about the impact to humans, and it's going to be fast, but not easy. One of the reasons for writing the book and being inspired to do the show is to really help people get through this era faster and in a more educated way, because it is going to have a big impact. And if we haven't mentioned it already or implied it, generative AI, man, every time I click away, okay, I gotta do that differently. It hasn't been doing that. Now I realize I'm doing something different. But where does generative AI really fit here, and how do you drive value? That's the sweet spot. So another key point is I'm going to show demonstrations of using ChatGPT. There's so many tools out there, but I'm just settling on that as the core. And I basically replaced myself by AI. So I'm going to demonstrate how this actually happens, which is a tough thing to swallow, And so since I've been through it and I've seen it, it is an existential moment. And anyway, so on to the segment recap. We're pretty much, we do this in sections, about 20 minutes each. But Tom, hope you're ready.
Let's do it.
What's the name of this bunny? No idea? No idea? I'm going to go with furry Whisker Volta. What do you think of that? Like John Travolta? Furry Whisker Volta? Or Fur Whisker Volta? You didn't seem to like that one. Anyway, maybe there's some
I was
audience.
thinking, I was thinking like a little Rick James or something, but
Okay, so that could be Verk James Volta. In any event, let's keep going. We always dedicate part, and we're still figuring out advertisers and whatnot, but we think Suno, if you haven't seen it, it's an AI-based music maker. It can literally take, as Tom likes to talk about, somebody who couldn't actually compose a song, and lets them compose not only a song, but an amazing song. And when I look at this, and for people that have been software for a while, when you look at a UI, you can not only pick apart the elements of the UI, but you can start to organize in your head how the code was actually written to support this, at least the functions, because those are common patterns. And you can even, if you know full stack, you can even begin to say, oh, this feature, the data that's being served, it probably has to be based on a graph database or a data structure server or things like that. And I just want to point out the genius of this. And I keep giving the whole team props, but as a product guy who learned in college how to design many different types of products, and a musician who plays multiple instruments, just one element of Suno, and there's so many parallels to what marketing and sales does here, because you're producing content, but the elements of a song are typically here: verse, chorus, bridge, and you bring the song to a close. They have this taxonomy structured for the instruments, the voices, the beats per minute. There's all these elements, but what's unbelievable about this is how simple it is to produce something amazing. And I think there's an analogy about a team working together. To me, what Suno's done is this in many ways. They are a shining example, right? So we want to give a shout out to the Suno team. And now let's move kind of into the feature leading into the first segment. And this is called the GEO perspective. All right. And why we call it the GEO perspective is that everyone on the exec team is going to need to learn really how to strategically manage this stuff. And any leaders who are at a weakness, and this doesn't matter if you're the CEO of the company or the CEO of the department or the CEO of your career, right? And so we're going to lead in and really try to just focus on the top level of the organization. I think the rest of the show is going to get very hands-on in terms of what sales, marketing, and chief revenue officers have to think through, even chief product officers. And so the point I want to make here, and let me again move this out of the way. Again, sales, Sam is like the poster child of, I mean, he is, right? And so one of the things that came out recently, and I mentioned on a previous show that the governments are investing in this. You know, this guy's out going on a road show with the UAE at a government level, asking for $1 billion to pay for fabs, data centers, and nuclear power plants. When you come up with an innovation that fundamentally alters the energy industry, it's kind of a big deal, right? And so I'll also encourage CEOs to really spend some time thinking about this. This is what Bing looked like. What does this say? I can't read it. Is that 2022, 2011, somewhere in there? Sorry, that was a big. This is several years ago. This is current, right? And so you can do the same thing with Google, but they haven't really released, a GPT-based search, and they're going to try to outdo Microsoft. But when you search here, I just want a CEO to think about if data is the new oil or data is the new electricity. Whether it's Google or Bing, you're like doing 1, 3, 5, maybe 7, pieces of metadata, pieces of data in your search phrase. And then look how they redesign it. Like as a CEO, you should be able to kind of pick apart the design, especially if you're in the technology industry, of applications. If you run an application, then certainly you're an expert at this. But look at what. So now when you search Bing, it automatically does this Copilot thing. So you can see they're going after astronomy, summarize the top news, and you can tell it what's most important. You can ask it history, right? They're promoting pro. And instead of search for something, it's ask me something, right? And then somewhere in here, product management prioritize things. They prioritized, this is what they're promoting. So somebody came and said, you know what? Graphics are important. We want everyone to be able to, sorry folks, we've been testing before we decide conference technology, and consider this a free ad for Zoom. In any event, next, and I haven't tried this, close. I tried it once. Personal shopper, vacation planner, right? This is like, discretionary income. This is discretionary income, but then help me cook. And then, I don't know, have you played with fitness trainer a lot? Because you are actually an expert in this area. You've had a hobby in this area forever.
Yes, I have gone back to it extensively. And
Really?
yes, and I've watched extensive. I mean, I've watched how it's evolved. In the short time that it's been listed there, it's evolved. um,
I'm
it's
sure.
Yeah, and just the velocity of the changes in it.
Oh man.
When I first started, I was like,
Mm.
this is lightweight, and I went back to it not that not that long ago. It's like,
Was it like a month between the beginning and the?
maybe 2 months, and
Yeah.
and then it was just hope.
Yeah.
And if people who are product managers viewed things from that perspective, I mean, this is the world we live in with B2C type stuff. I mean, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And this is like in 2 to 3 months. So in December, I think Because remember, they're looking at, and if you're a CEO, this is a really important point, or a leader, or a business leader. Let's just say whatever this app is yours, you're in the market, whatever you do. This is basically selling services, but it's completely automated. They're tracking all the data, and they've got algorithms to continually improve. I think in December, I wouldn't be surprised if you could buy somebody an advanced fitness trainer for the holidays. I really wouldn't be surprised. Not at all. In any event, here's what here, and that's what's happening to every company, right? So here's what the two of the main things we're going to cover in this show from the high level perspective is, one, we're going to pull apart how product, employee, and media are coming together, and this is generative AI, and this is kind of surrounding your customer. And then I'm going to show how in the old process, and again, I've shown this and people are like, I don't believe it. And I'm like, I'm going to demo it for you. And we're going to do some demos and explain how one person can just get ridiculously more output. And I don't care if this is sales or marketing or product or strategy or services or consulting. So that's the GEO point of view. As a quick recap, let's move us over here. Chapter 1, the executive summary, was about this. Again, you can press pause, or you can go back to the Chapter 1, Episode 1 to have it unpacked. We covered things like how value is migrating, right? And if you search for value migration and you study this chart, or you can go watch the show, basically the main point is that Gen AI is forcing this transition from basically having this, I would call the kind of the cash cow era of the business, right? So this is high level strategy. This is where innovation is being brought to market. And then this is typically where you start to see price wars and commoditization. In chapter 2, I used my daughter's use case training, the way I trained her for generative AI, so that she could go from this drawing of her favorite musician to this professional illustration that could be on a box for a doll in Walmart or wherever on Amazon. And then I applied design thinking and picked apart, and it's really us discussing this stuff, right? Not just me. And so in chapter 3, we talked about how generative AI works, and you can see every one of these has a theme, and I built every one of these with generative AI. And one of the hard challenges that people have at the beginning is having certain amount of repeatability, because what generative is great at is being creative with language. And if you ask it the same question 10 different times or change one word, you'll get many different answers until you can program it with English on how to get more consistency. But we talked about, this was the big diagram. This is one of my favorites, but we talked about how do you create a quality small language model? What are the kind of requests you can make of it once this is sitting on generative AI like ChatGPT or Google or whatever, and how many outputs? And then we've got here, this was a fun chapter. We unpacked the apps that I piloted to prove how I could automate myself, all the companies that I worked with, and trying to look at generative AI startups. And Tom, any quick 30-second thought about this? This is fairly recent. You had some profound things to say about, wow, when you spend a lot of time here, it's pretty eye-opening, right?
Well, I mean, people who, we talked before about sales teams, which are made up typically of an account executive, and then someone who is like a sales engineer or sales engineers who come together to produce demo or some proof of concept type things. Which the idea isn't that an app isn't something that people are going to use. It's to prove capabilities in the sales cycle, and more that's become important in B2B sales cycles. Folks who don't do it generally don't get a whole lot of money for it, if they get sales at all.
Yep.
And so the teams are typically constrained by those sales engineers. Those are the constraining resource, in terms of how many opportunities they can chase at once that are active. And it takes time and energy for those guys to put something together. And oftentimes if they're responding to RFPs or requests for proposals, um, sometimes they have to do work in those areas as well. But the idea is that, I mean, the reality is those sales teams are expensive, and you just can't push more and more through them unless you really change their capabilities. One of the things we find in our consulting work is that, especially with M&A groups, they, you know, a smaller startup or a group that's been around for a while is suddenly acquired by a big company like Oracle or Salesforce or SAP. And they say, okay, we're going to try to keep these sales teams together, keep them all together because they were successful. We're just going to use our metrics and push, a substantial amount more volume through them. And almost immediately, their ability to close business falls off because they didn't increase
They're
their
at capacity.
capacity.
Yeah.
Yes, they just push more at them, and they just don't get the results that they were even getting previously.
Yeah,
So
and
these
you're
these
going to
are
burn
very
people
real
out.
type things.
Yeah, you're
Yes.
going to burn people out. And also, I'll say at my last gig, the CEO had 2 exits. One went public, big SaaS companies. But what he's done is automate solution architecture. And I was doing that. I could get off a call, and in an hour, I could send back some pretty good stuff, like more advanced than the average, because we already had a lot of automation. But now this thing, it can't get into the end zone. Well, at the standard I've got, which is a VC investment standard, they couldn't get into the end zone. But for coming up with just any app, it would actually start building it for you. And I could get off a call. Actually, I get off a 5-minute call and send them an example app. And it's just unbelievable. So the stuff we covered here was how I did these things. We talked about these pilots to automate myself, the startups I looked at. And then again, we saw the company I worked for, or I saw the company I worked for automate things. And I've used this book as a knowledge base, as an example. In fact, at the end of the show, I'll share my link so you can go ask the book any question you want. And then in the last show, which was, put this right here. Well, I don't know. I don't have a good spot. There we go. I like the imagery. And again, I basically sent variables to ChatGPT, DALL-E in this case. But we spoke a lot about departments and convergence, changes to budgets, investments, and some of the slides we explained was like, how does budget change? How does organization change? All right. So Tom, one of the things, right, we talked about in that show was just how budget changes. We talked about org changes and whatnot. And again, that was chapter 5, which would be episode 5. So bunny naming time. I'm going to go with Tony, not Hawk, because that would be bad for a bunny. I'm going to go with Tony Rabbit. How's that? What do you think? You got a name yet? Nope. Okay. We see who's the engineer.
I'm still in shock from the rabbit itself.
Can you believe that that's replicated every time?
If you put a hawk up above it, that might have a different set of imagery there too.
Yeah, then those would be the hawks. Yeah, I wouldn't do that. But literally, I programmed AI to always consistently use a bunny with an afro, which is in a template that's hard coded. And then you can see the variables. But so this is meaty. We're gonna dive into really the guts of how marketing and sales needs to think about this in a strategic, operational, and tactical view. But we're going to dedicate this, since we got bunnies, to a carrot meme. And when I was searching for these, like there's carrots that are shaped like all kinds of unexpected things,
Yeah.
I will say, but this one I thought was clever, right? So I guess it doesn't want to get cut. All right, let's jump into the details of this show. We're gonna or this chapter. We're gonna talk about how things have evolved. We're gonna talk about how content and by content I mean any communications really, and it's back and forth. And we're gonna talk about product-led growth, how processes change, and then things like messaging, new product launches, web-based selling. I'm going to give demos on those as we kind of whiteboard on top of these diagrams. And I will say this show, since it is meaty, we try to keep it to an hour. And we've done that successfully, I think, for the past few shows. But when there's meatier topics, it's just going to be a little longer. You can watch it in separate sets or not watch it. But I would say for anyone, so if I was leading a sales marketing CRO or advising those guys on leading an organization through the generative AI future, this is a chapter we would spend a lot of time on. And so, Tom, let's kind of take off the gloves of slowing this down because I want you to pick this apart with me and ask some challenging questions and add some thoughts. And we'll try to be concise, but there's just so much people can learn in this chapter to help their career forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So
The
moving ahead, I just wanted to show that the amount of detail right in here. And actually it's totally on accident. I just realized that I used a beautiful woman with an afro. Actually, it automatically makes everyone, attractive by whatever standards. In any event, just look at the detail here. It's pretty amazing. That was me changing a prompt. All right, so the media and content evolution. And again, anytime I move stuff around, you can go download the book to read the additional info, but I seem to be tending to put our stuff up here. I want to talk about this for a minute because there's so much content that already exists in an organization that can be leveraged in a small language model. And if we look back in the 90s, things for a lot of software companies and a lot of B2B companies and even B2C were more disjointed, right? We hadn't had CRM systems. We hadn't really had content management systems, website systems, portals, all this stuff. And we did have email, but even email didn't really become common until like what? AOL, like 92, 93, 94. It really still wasn't mainstream in businesses until 96, 97, 98, which is hard to believe. But in the 2000s, just to give a milestone here, so in the mid 2000s, YouTube, and I worked at a competitor of theirs. I got the wrong company, but an Apple iPhone launch, right? So when you look at this stuff, you've got different technologies, subscription payments, mobile, cloud, AI, big data. As you move into the 2010s and beyond, a lot of predictive analytics was showing up in this area, open source, API tech shifts, stuff like that. But when I look at really content-driven things, right, that sales and marketing people have to pay attention to, really, generative AI, in principle, because you can feed it any web page you want, right, becomes the UI interface to all this stuff, right? If we look forward into the 2020s. What 2020s? Tom, any quick thoughts on this based on, your experience in life going through this and where you see it going?
Well, basically, what's happened is this is basically the ecosystem here. And all of these things have just had tremendous growth in and of themselves. But the fact that they all together, they form this ecosystem, which enables so much today to occur at a fraction of the cost that it used to, with much more computing power, much more capability than what used to be there. You can bring to bear new apps and new capabilities within these apps very, very quickly. And now with Gen AI, what we're talking about is the traditional product development, which always, took a little longer, right? Humans were in the middle in a big way. You have to somehow make sense of what's going on with your customers, oftentimes by talking to them, doing ad hoc analysis and other things with them. Now, with the instrumentation of everything, the instrumentation of how people interact with your websites, who interact with your apps, who interact with your smart devices, um, that's producing a constant stream of data, which now
It already exists.
yes, that's been building up for the last 20 years, but people have been data rich and knowledge poor for a long time, and that's changing now, where Gen AI in particular, is just attacking that and removing some of those last big hurdles to better insight quickly.
Yeah. And an important point here is like in all this, let's just say in all this stuff. So this stuff can actually make up your own large language model or curated small language model, right? You can use all this stuff. Now, will it give you the quality answers that you want? That's a whole project, right? And that's step 5, step 6, step 7. But you really got this stuff available. And I piloted like what happens when I take URLs from the blog or social media or user generated content or online community, and you can ask it questions, right? And I'll even show real quick on, no, I'll save this for a minute. All right, so let's keep going. Is this thing on? Let me go back to the pen. Okay. So if we took all that stuff that was on the prior slide and we transformed it, this is how I would start to organize it. All right, and put it in a bigger context. So again, we've got generative AI with the company out here, but really this is the main interface for the customer, right? And so when I look at the raw data types or the raw interactions that support the customer experience, it's really simplified this way at a high level, right? We've got sales and marketing interactions through content or media, right? So a lot of that stuff on the prior slide goes into this media content, right? And if you push all this stuff into generative AI and do it well, this is something customers interact with a lot. In fact, I would say for most SaaS applications, if you took away the knowledge base and the community and the documentation, your product would be considered unusable. Those are table stakes. But besides the sales and marketing interactions, which are now through media, you're of course going to have the software product interactions. And even if you sell pills or you sell cars, there's still a huge product interaction. It's just that the product happens to be the marketing website or whatever. But here's all the ways that customers will interact with product. But not all of them, it's a good set of them, right? UI, data logic, in-app media content. And again, Gen AI is going to be the interface for the customer in a lot of this. And we're not saying the normal UI is going to go away right away, but it's Gen AI is going to become more and more integrated with the product. In fact, I would go so far as to say every software product out there is going to have a new Gen AI layer in the stack. And then we've got human interaction, right? So this is where the customer actually has to talk to an employee, right? And this is stuff that employees do. And if you're going to automate things, obviously you want to, and the product-led growth motion is showing, and it's been around now for, I don't know, maybe it started 10 years ago. is showing that it moves into these areas. And that's what we talked about in many of the episodes. So, you have a couple of quick thoughts on this?
Uh, the real, I don't know if now's the time for the example or not, but I do want to make sure that we talk about the example from the device manufacturer, the printer device
Yeah,
manufacturer.
you had mentioned that. You had mentioned that before. If it's relevant here, again, we're at 48 minutes. I think, we're just SOL on getting
The
it
top,
within an hour, and we're going to keep going.
yeah, the top level thing of that is they used to have teams of analysts who would look at the data that would come out from that, try to figure out or
Come out
um,
from what exactly?
their printers, okay? The usage of
Okay,
their
so you
printers
got a
and the software
B2B printer
programs.
company, robust
B2B and
printers,
B2C.
and
B2B and
B2C,
B2C. Yeah.
well-known brand, been around a long time, and they're putting in an IoT thing. And now what?
Well, they're
Data
not putting it
streaming
in.
off the
This is their
printers.
third generation, okay?
Okay.
And that produces an immense amount of data about everything. And they had some analysis of that previously, and big dedicated analytics teams that worked on this stuff. And they're figuring out what's going on with the printer, what's going on with consumables, what's going on with the customer in terms of how often they use it or not, those type things. And then they produced all sorts of analytic um, reports and dashboards for the customer, for the people who are in customer service, and then also for sales and marketing, so that they could give them the right package of sales and service and consumables that met their needs exactly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And these things were optimized based upon the customer's actual usage, demand patterns, et cetera. And used to do this with fairly large teams of people. The IoT team was composed of however many folks, and then the analytics on the raw IoT data, which put it into some sort of a more usable and consolidated forms or formats into their data lakehouse. And then they had additional teams which would then pick that up and work on that and try to figure out what all that stuff meant for particular groups of customers. And when they moved to something that was a bit more automated in this area, the number of people in every area decreased by about 80%.
Wow.
Okay. And that's people in the analytics areas, people in the data processing areas, um, people at each stage along the data pipeline. But the groups, the number of people who are in the sales and sales support roles, also while they didn't remove them, they greatly increased their span. So instead of
Yeah.
one sales team handling 6 to 8 accounts, they tripled those numbers because
Wow.
less and less time was spent trying to compile things, producing reports, or trying to make
Yeah.
sense of the reports that were there. Um,
Yeah.
so the immediate impact was an increase in sales efficiency
And effectiveness.
and absolutely increased their business. And they were able to win more deals because they would adjust the actual offer bundle to the customer based upon their specific consumption patterns, optimized for them, not optimized
And this
for.
this was predictive AI, not generative AI, right?
It was predictive, and they've added generative AI
Or
since
they have
then,
now?
and that's even further reduced the number of people that were involved.
So what you're saying is they took these human interactions and built IoT into the product with streaming data, and that was more predictive AI, and that built the streamlining you mentioned. And maybe some of that human interaction went to media, but that was the old AI. And now with Gen AI, they can do it even more. And instead of finding 3x more productivity like they did, it's going to just be 10x
The
more
time
productivity.
that it takes to do the analysis and build the analytics and the other things, that's all been drastically slashed,
Yeah.
and that's become they even have richer analytics in this area.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
Because you can
and so
actually
it's
see you don't get like a custom like Google search analytics. Google Analytics is going to change drastically.
Yes.
Like,
If they're going to
because
remain
you're
competitive.
studying up, my hand went up again. You're studying instead of clicks, you're not analyzing clicks anymore.
That's
Like
correct.
every marketer's been analyzing clicks. Now you have to analyze actual conversations. And that's a big deal. So let's keep going here. Where is my pen? There we go. All right. So we've talked about some of this before, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this slide. I just want to make one quick point here. And this could be B2C just the same. Without a product-led growth motion, and we've talked about how separating all this into their own little Gen AI projects, or maybe one person in sales has their own little one and one person in marketing, and they're not bringing it together. In a non-PLG model, the interaction across these things, it's not as an effective and efficient business model, right? This is why every SaaS company is trying to solve for this.
Well, there's no sales guy who could use ad hoc Gen AI to work on the IoT stream that isn't, set up for it.
And exactly, and they're not comped for that, and they're not hired for that, right? But in a PLG model where you've already got these things kind of integrated, revenue ops as an example, wow, this is the area where you can bring together the language model across these groups, and I think that's going to be a major advantage. I think we're going to see, since the machine and the humans in the middle here are more oiled and integrated, that the machines here are going to be even faster, better. All right. So here's what I'm going to demo. And Tom, we've talked about this, but take a minute and tell me what's so profound about this. When we were talking about this, I remember many times you're like, "Oh my God, are you serious? You did that?" I did this. And over at the top here, we've got a bunch of employees, each creating an output that's 100% done. But me, as an employee, once I programmed the thing here, I was getting outputs 90% done. So that changes my job role. However, this can scale. I'm the only quality and human in the loop, quality assurance and human in the loop, and some technical improvement is the only thing keeping me from scaling all the way to 100%. So when we started talking about this and I first did the pilots, what popped in your head?
Well, there's two things. First,
and give me the sales and the marketing and the product view. So
all right.
sales
Well,
first. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, first, that person has to become a generalist and has to take on the role of curation and editing, as opposed to initial content production. And that mindset is, not everyone can make that switch or is comfortable in that.
A generalist who does what? Who's taking on the human in the middle?
The generalist moves across all those different domains that specifically were,
these domains. The
divvied up
generalist
amongst employees.
has to have
Yes.
command of it. Yep.
Yeah, and not everyone can do that.
No.
Okay. Secondly, you have, by relying on something else for the majority of the content production, what you're doing then is you're moving into a curation and editing type role or a finisher type role. And this is something that not everyone is comfortable with either. Okay. One of the things that we used to do, in the software world, the guy who's really good at doing the initial code for something, gets kind of solves the essence of the problem. You never want that code to go into production.
Right. You need
Never
it to
done,
be refactored.
but he is really, really good at grasping the essence of it.
Or
not being
she,
lost
or they. Keep going.
Stop it. Yes, or furry bunny, whatever it is.
Right.
But that person is really good at ignoring all the company standards and coding standards and all this other stuff and saying, what's the essence of the problem? How would I solve it directly? What they're really bad at is doing all that other stuff and finishing it And what they're even worse at is doing a review of what somebody who did, the bulk of that production, and saying, is it up to certain standards? Is it appropriate
Yeah.
from an overall QA perspective? Does it fit with the rest of the
Yeah.
um, areas? So there's that integrational type aspect as well. Those types of perspectives are you don't just hire someone off the street who can do those. And this will become an issue with companies in the future for how do you train employees up to be able to work
Yeah.
at that level.
Yeah.
But given all that stuff, so I've just taken kind of the hard look at all of it. If you can overcome those things, or you can have someone who's got the right perspective, you can absolutely do this.
Oh yeah. Without
And
question.
yeah,
Yep.
so and that's you're not the average bear. And I'd just like to point out that this isn't going to just magically align itself with every organization and with anyone that you put in that role,
Yep.
because they have to be able to operate in this sort of a mode, and it requires training typically more diverse
Yeah.
and widespread than what they get in individual roles in narrow areas today.
Yeah. And
That makes sense.
yeah, it does make sense. And I think this is the great, like, we should just clip this out and send this to our human resource recruiters friends, because I've been looking at the different jobs out there with generative AI on the business side, mainly on LinkedIn. And it's very, very clear to me that people don't even know how to describe what they want on the business side. The prompt engineer, everybody says, oh yeah, we want a prompt engineer. But unless you've got a prompt engineer that understands how marketing and sales communicate, yeah, they gotta find somebody to help them, right? And that's going to be very, very uncommon, you know. And so I want to go to the next slide. So here's an example of what I did. All right, in the pilots, and this was marketing, and this was sales. So this was content generation internally, so that this employee could do something, but this was asking questions of Gen AI as if I was a salesperson. So the way it's worked in the past is an employee typically, you find a couple of different types of marketing organizations, but on the spectrum, you got ones that absolutely see messaging as a communications template that everything needs to follow. And then you see ones that are like, they don't have that, and it just goes through these rambunctious review cycles that are ridiculous. I see like it wastes so much CEO time. In any event, the employee is going to load the seed content, or what we've been calling a quality small language model, and then the employee
Some employee is going to do it. Maybe not that one.
Yes, maybe not that one. Yeah. And then again, it used to be there, this didn't happen, and this didn't happen. You just gave the messaging content to whoever this employee was, and it is going to be different employees here, right? And so I'm sorry, it would have been different employees in the past, but now this employee is going to say, all right, Gen AI, give me the output of a press release, a proposal, email copy, web page, whatever. And this is where people are playing right now. They're like, oh my God, I can do this. Oh my God, I can do that. But you should be able to, literally with blog posts, I'm like, if somebody wants me to do a lot of writing for them, I'm like, well, how many posts do you want? It used to be like a few years ago when I was working at Pivotal and AI and doing evangelism for their exhaustive stack of products. We could produce 3 long form content pieces, 2 to 3 of all different types in a week. And now I just wrote one, and the baseline, it took me minutes. And I had to tweak it some and feed it back in. And then I got the blog based on the book for my website, which I recently posted, I think on Monday. I still spent some really quality time with it, more than I needed. But easily in an hour, I got it over the line so instead of doing 3 per week, I could have done 3 or 4 per day. Right. And the main reason I couldn't do more is because I didn't have it highly tuned enough. But once I got into the fine tuning, I think I could just, so the world of user generated content, which is where so much of the marketing and, going after people who are, the YouTubers or the thought leaders or the people that have their own little micro audience. It's now, that became leader, generated content. And now, I mean, these folks are figuring out how to just create a fire hose stream. Like, I could just light Twitter up until they max me out, right? So on the sales side, and I've got a demo where we're going to show this, right? And I got a demo where we're going to show this. But on the sales side, again, somebody's got to create this baseline, quality, curated, small language model, and quality really matters here. If you load a million different things and you don't tune it, your output is going to be all over the place. The tuning is going to have very different contexts. But again, just like this, load it, and instead of an employee, this is a customer. And so you end up with Q&A. So like the company I work with, on each page, we listed like 10 different, at the bottom of the page, like 10 different frequently asked questions, and it's no different. So when we were talking about this originally, and I'm going to do a demo here, what were your thoughts? What popped in your head as we first started talking about this, and then now? What is the main thing, your perspective, your experience, maybe a client example or something?
I was a LinkedIn or have been a LinkedIn premium member for a long time, and LinkedIn started to demo some of their AI capabilities a few months ago. And one of the things that you put in, here I'm looking for a job, or I might be looking for a job. How well do I fit against this thing that I'm going after? Okay, a typical type thing that allowed you to do early on.
Yeah.
And as a customer, I was interacting with their knowledge base. For the first month or so, the responses were, "You're a terrible fit." Because I tried a whole bunch of different things. And some of them, the response back, well, probably accurate, was probably not the tone and the approach that they wanted to have, and they figured that out, right?
Yeah.
But that tuning was probably an important part, because the initial reactions that I had at the time were, the first, I got some really interesting responses along those lines. And so I just tried all sorts of different things just to see how widely, I knew they weren't matches at all, and they were intentionally to see what it would say. And I got a lot of humor. I found a lot of humor in it. I'm not sure everyone who in a customer role would necessarily see it the same way. But it's one of those things that it took a little bit of work, and on their side, I'm sure. But it certainly has straightened itself out over the course of a few months.
Yeah.
And what they initially said they were going to do with the scope for this got pared way back in terms of the types of data it looks at and the types of matching it attempts to do. And that was initially I said, oh, everything. And then the more stable product, which is now available to a larger number of people, is much less ambitious in its initial scope. But like anything, it will grow and improve. But
for me, I've said for years, I'm an interesting one. I don't fit in the normal mold. But for me, LinkedIn is very broken, and I know it is for anyone who's trying to fit in a unique role versus a standard role, which means LinkedIn's optimized for the masses, which makes sense. But I've experienced, I think about that on the recruiter side, right? I've got a long, there was a close friend of mine for a while, like 14 years or so, that had spent a lot of time in recruiting, and I've had other friends. And when I think about their job on, when they're trying to hire someone, I mean, the amount of data they have through this AI is fantastic, but it is far from being human. I mean, every application that I would potentially consider, every job description that I would potentially consider, because they notify you all the time about these things. It's like you click on it and there's already 100 applicants. It's just, this world has changed for HR people. Anyway, so let's go to a example here. Let me bring up ChatGPT. We got about 7 minutes left in this recording time frame, and this is going to be a long show, but it's going to be worth it, guaranteed. All right, so let me see where I can move you out of the way here. All right, so in the slide we talked about creating this kind of stuff, right? And again, this is built on this set of inquiries here. I wish I could draw on this website. Can you do that, Microsoft?
I'm not sure if you can.
And more tools. Maybe there's an add-in for that. I'll have to check that out. That would be cool.
You can do a laser pointer on it.
Can I?
Yeah, that the menu you just had up with the additional stuff. There should be a.
No, maybe if I'm casting media to a device.
That's probably one of my add-ins then.
Okay. All right. Well, I got to add that add-in. That's a pretty awesome add-in. In any event, up here, hopefully you can see, there should be something you can see. Up here at the top. All right. Quit messing around with it. What I've done is, again, we have a small language model back here. If you, and I'm pretty sure, actually, I don't know that, I think I used regular here. So, it's just a 500-word sales email. This is a very generic prompt, no engineering at all, just random human thinking. And we can see it created an email. If you haven't done that before, now you get an idea. This is just a general answer. When I started to look at really applying this to automate sales and marketing, let me walk through the beginnings of a messaging example. And so let's go back here. So again, we talked about this in another show. The messaging stuff's above, but I use that to build, all right, more and more outputs. And so just as an example, give me the top 10 taglines in a 3-word list, 5-word, and 7-word, right? This would be something marketing people would talk about, right? What are the terms that we want to consistently say? And not only marketing, but the CEO, products involved, sales is involved, right? So here's an example of how I use the book to output. And on the previous, whiteboard, it was a press release or, proposal or email copy. But, I can turn around and say, okay, based on those, how would I do positioning? And it gives me ideas. Now, you have to have a certain level of savvy to judge these. But for anyone that doesn't have that savvy, doing this automatically is insane. And then I said, give me a story format of this book. I could have said, outline a sales training, right? And so my pilot, basically what I did was I gave it a very structured prompt, and the app that I had built would go through 30 different types of marketing output, just like that, 30 seconds each. Boom, 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 boom. And so this is just an example of do a story. So it explains, and I think we've used this example before, the protagonist, et cetera, et cetera. Give me an elevator pitch. All right, and I could have said exactly how I want the elevator pitch done. I could have said, use this example, and I wanted 5. So here we go. Here's a pitch for innovative. In any event, it gives you the starting point in 30 seconds. All right, what would be the brand promise for this book? You might as well just say the brand promise for any software, right? Any product. All right, here's the brand promise. Is that right or wrong? It depends on your input and how you think about it. All right, can you speak in the vernacular of a management consultant? All right, so if you have high-end salespeople that are actually also kind of management consultants, it's like, okay, stuff we talk about, leveraging AI for competitive advantage, strategic transformation, pathway to AI. And this is words that management consultants use: sustainable growth and innovation. And if you're a word nerd like me and you study the etymology of words and you understand how to communicate to different audiences, you can see it clear as day. And then I'm like, all right, for an art director or a creative director, which I've been in the past and I still have graphic design skills, like you can see the imagery in the book. I can do creative and art direction, no problem. And in this case, I'm saying, give me a description of creative imagery as if I was going to use Dolly, right? So it says a diverse team in a futuristic office. So literally in 30 seconds, I can send the CMO, or somebody can send me as the CMO or the CRO, or even the CMO or CRO can sit down and go, have a 15-minute meeting with their brand person and get to some conclusions here. Now, again, generative is
Adam,
divergent,
Adam,
and
Adam,
getting it back
Adam,
is crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
Adam. The key thing here is you're able to personalize and customize the messages to your intended audience without having to have a huge amount of depth or experience there. And again, working from the solid, the curated small language model, if you've got really good quality there, which this is a good example of,
Yeah.
you are able to tailor your message very, very precisely to your audience or to your particular person. And that's really, I think, what the punchline here is: the ability to do that, which in the past, sales guys would craft these things. Why? Because the expression "no breath is better than bad breath." They would want to make sure that they had something that was meaningful to that person, and they wanted to show that person that they heard them,
Yeah.
and reflect that back along with the bias of their product or service.
Yeah.
Um,
So,
but that's
so yeah.
that's that instant personalization. That instant personalization, which in the past was expensive, took a long time, but was really expected of sales teams, that now can be done instantly by your almost anyone in your sales team, including your SDRs and your BDRs, people at the very front end. So the bar is being raised and raised dramatically.
The bar's
And
being raised, but all of a sudden, there's so many times in my life I'm so committed to quality content. You see me struggle with this at times where it's like I want something that I work on to be the best I've ever done. I push myself too hard. I've got plenty of therapy bills because some life journey instances from pushing myself too hard to be great at what I do. But quality really matters now. I've worked with so many sales and marketing folks who are just, okay, just get it out the door, just check the checkbox, and it was good. It's B+ work. Getting into A work is really hard. But when you're talking about, and it takes a lot more time, unless you're just, you always get a 4.0 kind of thing, and still you put yourself into it. But now when you're training a bunch of droids, when you're training a bunch of stormtroopers to do something, you better have quality. It's clear, as we've kidded before, that stormtroopers do not have a good small language model for how to point their blaster at things and actually kill it. That's a flaw in the software. In any event, so based on this last slide, I mean, I'm showing you right in front of your eyes how in minutes I'm producing all types of content. And again, like, am I 10 times faster with this? No, I'm 100 times faster, easily. And what it comes down to is, like you were saying before, somebody's got to understand the whole span. They have to have written email and white papers and everything to know how to bring it together. But also, quality matters, maturity matters, a mindset for quality assurance of content. All this stuff matters instead of just, I've seen so many situations where the head of sales or the head of marketing is just get it done and do it and get it done by tomorrow. This is not something you want to do it that way. And so we also kind of started to explain on this next slide, and we've talked about this on other shows, where we're using AI to build part of the small language model, or this is called what I would call maybe curating a quality filter. Okay. We've talked about a quality curated small language model. As we've talked about in the previous slides, messaging is an input, and you can usually actually use generative AI to help. This one, I would highly question unless you use a specialized service in your industry and it's very up to date. In fact, I saw one the other day where it just, you can already get newsletters, about industry trends and whatnot. But I saw one that's using Gen AI. I didn't get to look at it, but I'm very curious. But you get, Google alerts. You've been using old school AI, old school, right? But now you can't do current state. You can't actually get customer input unless you engage with customers. Your current state, actually, you could analyze your current state of content, and you would analyze your current state of content with generative AI. And messaging, this is my sweet spot, right? This is one of the things I have done a lot in a lot of different situations, and usually get very, very high kudos, like the last venture capital guy who hired me and had 5 exits. But the work I did for him took a month or 2. I can go through this now in an hour. Not quite the same, but I can get the baseline research that I do so much faster. And it didn't take 2 months of actual work. It was a 2-month duration. In any event, this is internal information. You might be asking Gen AI for this, but you could also ask Gen AI, as long as it's up to speed, right? Like ChatGPT 4.0, I think has a cutoff of December 23rd or something. But you're not going to get the most current. You can analyze customers, but you're not going to use this so much because it's very creative. It's something generative AI could inform, and then corporate strategy as well. Actually, generative AI is used for all of these, and you plug it into the small language model. Tom, you've been doing a lot of this lately with using generative AI. What are your thoughts here?
I mean, when people talk about you can or you can't use it for something, I always find that's a little. There's.
It's
I don't
not
see
black and
things.
white. I shouldn't have put
No,
it that way. Yeah.
no, and so even in the cases where we're doing future type stuff or things with, you can't necessarily get your hands on the latest information, or at least not readily.
Yeah.
We still find very effective ways to use it. And I think of it more as when I used to have a research staff, I consider it almost like a long tail of interns or,
Yeah.
1 through 5 employees, except for the fact that it gives instantaneous results and it's patient.
And
And
you don't
so,
have to pay it as much.
well, yeah, there's that. But the other thing though it does is that it forces me to be much more exacting and specific with it, and I have to iterate with all of it with that sort of a mindset, which isn't you do it for a few hours every day. It's not that hard at all. But the big thing is really I have to I have to digest its contents, because getting summaries upon summaries of it, you lose something there.
Yeah.
And there's an understanding level that, just because it gives it to you doesn't mean you understand, doesn't mean you understand shit. Okay.
Yep.
it takes a little while, right?
Yep.
Uh, should have a full bookcase full of yellow books for dummies because outside of our areas of our domains, most of the world is yellow dummy book to us, right? Um,
Yeah.
so it just because it can give it to you doesn't mean that you understand it, and you have to take the time to understand it. Um,
And
Now
yeah,
you can just use it, okay? But if you're going to do something that's strategic, if you're going to do something that, even whether it's strategic or not, if it's a big decision,
yeah, if it's a big
or if
decision.
it's even small decisions done hundreds of thousands of
Yeah.
times,
Yeah.
you know, you better get to the point of having some understanding.
Yeah. And
And
you can ask ChatGPT, to help you understand, but that's different than having a real command over years of experience, right? Something you
yes,
said about learning, I built the book as a small language model, and I think dummies, you know, books are now small language models, right?
absolutely.
I've asked ChatGPT to reference Harvard Business Review and McKinsey articles. And speaking of McKinsey, I've got a business theory I'm going to put out there real quick because they're struggling with their business model. And I see you smiling because I think you know what I'm about to say. I think somebody like Elon Musk could actually buy McKinsey on a dime, keep the 10% of the staff with the scope of the whole business content, the process, this, and turn it into a large language model, and the company would be worth way, 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 way more, because no one
Yes,
has that kind of content. Now, it completely democratizes it and changes from $500 an hour to pennies per interaction. But,
I got
this,
news for you. It's more than 500 an hour, and it's
yeah,
been
there you
that
go.
way for a
There you go.
long time. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So, all right, let's keep going. So now we've talked a little bit about messaging, and this is the research that's typically gone into it. The next slide is the framework I use, and it's been built over time from best practices starting at Siebel and Salesforce, and the beginning of even in the '90s with Siebel and all these other add-ons. It comes down to the structure. I don't think this is rocket science anymore, and this is certainly not strategic secret sauce. But what I wanted the book to know was that there was a structure here, a taxonomy that I could refer to. Okay. And that way, when I asked it to do certain things, and we've seen story, we saw elevator pitch, we saw brand promise, we saw this, you're seeing creative imagery, value proposition wouldn't be that hard. We've seen these, we've seen these, we've seen these. Process change, I haven't asked it much about that. I think that's an interesting one. We talked about competition, but uniqueness and what you commit to at your value prop level, humans got to drive that. Proof of outcomes, whole nother thing, right? But all this stuff feeds into product-led growth, and then you have all these other outputs, which I'm then, as I feed this stuff in, along with the book, and it leverages the large language model, my output's going to get that much better, right? So to me, this is one of the biggest ahas I had. If there's one thing I could help product marketers and CMOs and CROs and CSOs and heads of product in this book, you gotta hire the right person to do this. They have to be able to cover all these things. Or they're just gonna, or you have a team that each focuses on the other, but you gotta have some leader who's pulling it all together, who gets this stuff. If it's just game changing. So I'll pause there. I know you have a big reaction to this, but I want to explain it in a minute with a demo. So, what is your? Oh, I don't want to go to the demo yet. So, what are your thoughts on this, man? You've been through
Uh,
this with me now.
yeah, I've been through this quite a bit. Some of my larger engagements over the last couple of years have really focused on companies starting to um, move to this product-led growth area, and it's not a natural act for some larger organizations, especially those who are product management led. the Siebels, the Salesforces, the ServiceNows, the SAPs. The product manager is basically the owner of his fiefdom. Um, the product-led growth aspects of that have not always uh, well, they change the composition of the teams. They change the composition of how you make decisions. They change composition of the velocity at which changes are made. All those
It
things
changes
are
the entire business design. Let's just you have a business design that creates money. Pretty much every part of sales, marketing, and product, particularly in the software industry, it's just transformed. Period. End of story. Right?
yes, yes, but how many people are effectively doing this? We see people doing bits and pieces, especially some of the newer companies. But if you come from a strong product management tradition, sometimes that's hard to give up, okay,
No,
or to change.
it's any group. This is we've talked about this on the show before. It's like I was excited by this, but I've talked to people who are just they're scared, and they should be, right? And one of the reasons for doing this book and this show is to help people get through the process faster because there's going to be a group that's left behind. I feel bad for the 20 somethings and 30 somethings or the kids coming out of college that aren't getting this training. It's going to be a rough go. Um, but let me show something I just found here, Tom, that I forgot I did with process. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but where did
You're
it
good.
just go? Where did that just go? Here it is. So again, with this book, I'm going through the messaging stuff, and I just mentioned, process change wasn't in there, but I asked it, please explain the required process change with 2 sentences on these topics: capital, people, process, technology, data reporting, and generative AI automation. I tend to always break down into these, the organism of the business into these things, and maybe I'll add communications, value, and feelings. But there's like these core ingredients that make up business when you abstract it to a high level. I'm adding generative AI, and so in doing that, all right, let's now, is this right? You got to know your own business, but I'm asking it, it's telling me sales and marketing department. So it's saying right here, top 3: lead generation and qualification. All right, capital is going to change this way, people that way, process that way, policy this way, technology that way. All right, customer relationship management. All right, marketing campaign management. I mean, you've got so much. Again, you got to figure out how to filter it down. And then I'm saying, what are the top 10 opportunities to help companies with competitive differentiation? All right, be great at enhanced customer profiling. A sales team should probably take that on. The personalization aspects of this are off the charts. Please recommend 5 ways to survey the target audience, right? So I'm going on and on, but I love this chapter. I get very excited about this chapter, and it's just profound. Again, I say, oh, I kind of automated myself out of a job. You start to see this was stuff I was an expert in. And it's like, ooh, crazy. Right. So any thoughts again on that before we go to the next slide and start to bring this all together into some other examples? I mean, I'm
One
blown away
example,
by this. What about you?
the one example that sticks in my mind was for one of the largest uh, native SaaS enterprise software vendors that we've done work with, where they had a group which was primarily driven with product-led growth because they couldn't get they couldn't get a strong enough product management person in charge of it. That's
Yeah.
basically what happened. So by default, they went to a PLG sort of heavy situation. We said the top things that come back from that they would prioritize and work on, and they skipped a whole bunch of planning cycles. They skipped a whole bunch of priority stuff. They skipped all kinds of things that were inherent in the um, I call it the product management heavy processes that the rest of the company used, and they they had approximately 2.5 to 3 times the output in terms of features. And not only that, the features were used, okay,
That's
which
the
is
key
not
part.
something you could say, for the other development areas. In fact, the contrast between those was so great, we were asked politely not to bring it up.
Yeah, so the world changes. That kind of
Yes.
malarkey in this world is just like you see people making bad decisions in business now. It has a big impact, but now it's just going to be another scale. One other thing I want to mention when I've sold high-end technology or marketed it or evangelized it, particularly when you're trying to bring business leaders and tech teams together to establish, this was a lot, AI or high-end CRM or whatever. You're trying to you're selling into the business side to help sponsor, but the tech side's got to buy into it too before you start to implement it. All of a sudden you have, the high level, the mid level, and the low level business person, and the same with tech in the hierarchy. And so this represents now 6 ICPs. And everyone says, oh, you got to have one
Oh,
ICP.
hold on.
Wait.
ICP.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Ideal customer profile. This is your target audience, right? That's the
Yeah, yeah.
acronym
Your
that's been around.
or persona. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been called all these things forever. I love when somebody's like, oh, the ICP, that's cool. Haven't heard of an
Yeah.
ICP. I'm like, I don't know what you've been doing. I'm like, okay, target persona, target market. Who's our buyer? Who's our user? But it was necessary for us to be able to communicate to this whole group because of the size of the decision. These were companies that were making millions and millions of dollars of enterprise AI investment, right? It's not like one little, this is tech platform stuff for custom apps, high end, high scale. Customers like Expedia and Twitter were our customers. Um, and you could see just what I did, how you could quickly tune this for these 6 different ones. And there's strategies to do that. So anyway, let me go on to the next slide. All right, so let's give an example of a new product launch. All right, you're going to take your messaging inputs, which we just talked about, and some other of the high quality, whatever we're calling it, curated small language model, or I don't know. There's extra small. I mean, you get the point. And I've done this. I've asked it. Actually, one of the things I've fed it is a sales script that I hand wrote. But you can ask it if you've got the right model here to write a sales script for you, and it'll come out very well. Now, my view is for an output sales script to be really good, you need to build one of these and iterate and put it back into part of the model, part of the filter. I've done this with a technical white paper that I hand wrote, but there's no reason you couldn't use GPT to get your baseline here and then enhance it and feed it back. In fact, this is one of the strategies I highly recommend. And then for us, we're going to take the transcripts of these video shows plus the book. And again, whether this book was marketing output or sales output or interactions with product and content and whatnot, once you have this richness, you can ask it to create so many things here at speed, right? And so you should easily, at first I was like, well, 3 to 5 times more productivity. And then it was like easily 10. And then I was like, okay, I'm 100 times more productive, right? Like you can actually be a one-man studio. In any event, I want to show a demo of this. Again, just as an example so people can see the breadth. Now, this is not highly tuned in terms of graphics. I didn't give it a lot of input, but I said, I want a logo idea for this book. Now, I'm not using a specialized GPT for logos, which do exist. I'm just using baseline ChatGPT with all this because, well, it's the most pervasive, right? But here, I just said describe it in 100 words. All right, so it's building a prompt for me. It's saying sleek design. It's doing a creative brief. The centerpiece is this. overlaying this is that, bar charts, graphs. So it's saying, I know what the book is about. I'm going to describe as a creative director one option. Now, I could have tuned all this and made it tighter or focused it on something else, right? But let's just go with the basics here based on a small language model. So is that a logo? No, it's too complicated. But I've seen people put a lot of interesting graphics like this on, the homepage of a website, or build infographics off of it. And I said, all right, make it simpler, more like a traditional logo. I want it to work black and white, which is what logos tend to have to be. And it needs to be recognized from a distance, which is an important aspect of a logo. So that's much more interesting. And I could have iterated on that more. And I said, make it even simpler. Okay. Still too complicated, but you get the idea. And then in another example, and I'll give yet a third example, because we've talked about this, the showing people the demos of what's possible here is part of the value. But I said, based on the book, again, I wanted to I told it how to learn about the different chapters, and the different slides are actually pages, and the pages are numbered and the chapters are numbered. But I didn't set it up that well. It did an okay job, but you can see it added a lot of other stuff on here. In any event, I wanted to, what is if I'm going to ask this thing to make a video for me, let's just see what it's aware of in terms of content. All right. And I asked it to show me the slides. It couldn't do that, but it gave me a text description of each one. So as I'm going through designing a video, and I don't care if it's a demonstration video that's online or a conference or whatever, all of a sudden I've got material here that it's like, okay, I don't have to go back and look at it, assuming it was working perfectly, which again, this was just a quick example, not, so then I said, okay, based on all that, let's see what you do to generate a video. And in this case, I was testing something called Video GPT by Veed. But if you subscribe to different GPTs, you can do an @simple, and these are mentions, and you can bring other GPTs in. SlideMaker, there's the Veed one, and you can then ask it to look at the memory of this stuff. So I'm saying, based on the above, let's create a video. And it starts asking me questions, and I'm answering them. And then it says, okay, here's a proposed script. Okay, what's the voiceover? Who's the avatar? And let's see how it did. I don't even know if this is still online. I don't think I've looked at it yet. Yep, I have to sign in. Let's see what's happening. But if this doesn't convince you, I don't know what's going to convince you. All right, here's my Adam Bloom. What's going on? All right, continue. You haven't seen this before. The stuff keeps getting so much better, so much better, so much better. All right, let's see what it does. And we are way over. This is going to end up being a 2-hour show, I think, but well worth the content. I think this is game changing for people's career. Anyone that really studies this and follows along with it, they're already at a different level. They're already at a different level. I know I felt that way. I wonder if it's regenerating it as we go. All right, so let's give that a minute. And then I can give it tweaks, right? And now I'm asking it to summarize the book, and I'm asking the SlideMaker to do it, right? So the quality of this keeps changing, but let's see, did it come back with something yet? Nah, I'll be curious. Maybe we'll show it on another show. So, when you start to hook up something like OpenAI Sora to this or what have you, it's just crazy, right? All right, so we've shown a lot of demos. The one thing I'll say about a customer version of this, and I think we're going to shorten the time here and just point out that this is web-based selling. This is a scary one for a lot of people, but then a customer, you got to refine the model with human in the middle. You got to trust what they're asking. But if you've already got online facts and web pages and forums, you've already QA'd those things. Feed it into the model, right? If you do have humans supervising at first, feed that into the model. You want to make sure you can trust this, right? And so I just want to point out one thing here, and that is that recently, and I've used WordPress since like, I don't know, the early 2000s. On my website, I said, there's a drag and drop plugin. And I just spent the other day researching this area deeply because it's a game changer. The website's going to be reinvented. I mean, the concept of a website is being reinvented. And so I drag and drop this. You see this coming soon. Ask my bot a question. So right here on my website, not only can you chat with me, but you'll be able to ask my bot a question, right? And in this case, I have offers down here now. There's the show, there's the book. Where are the offers? Here we go. I've got offers with prices and stuff. It could actually make somebody an offer. And so this is just, if you're a consultant, I mean, I don't care if you're an independent or whatever, but you're getting to ask my brain and my book questions, and I'll digitally make you offers. So this, I just want to show when WordPress puts something out there, and I think like used to be, I don't know if it still is, something like 30% of web traffic, internet traffic is WordPress. It's just crazy, right? It's just crazy. All right, so last little plug for the book. Any guesses who I asked GPT to use for this as the persona? I'll give you a
Thomas
hint.
Jefferson, but
Oh, you were very close. Very close. George Washington. George Washington. So you can download the book. You know, you can check out the show on LinkedIn and YouTube. And, you know, the main thing is I want to know, it helps you, of course, if there's business opportunities, contact Tom or I, things like that. And we're running out of time. We're going to wrap this up in the next 10 minutes. So this is almost a 2-hour show, but you know, we made a call at the line of scrimmage that it would be worth it. That's a very long show. In any event, there's a lot of content that comes out of it that we can reuse. So with that said, again, I tested it with jokes. All right, this time Stephen Wright, who had very dry wit humor. Richard Pryor, who was a transformational comedian in an era in the 60s and 70s and 80s where African American culture, especially with comedy, was just coming to its own, right? And I think Red Fox was the guy before that. But then Cat Williams is more, you know, his comedian stuff is a pimp, right? So Stephen Wright, he always had these witty, you know, and I'm amazed. I played with jokes like 3 months ago, and I'm like, this thing can't tell good jokes. And I'm like, once I gave it a persona, the quality of the jokes improved. Hint, hint, hint. Give your GPT a persona. So Stephen Wright was always like very kind of dry and just had these funny quips. And right, I stayed up all night playing with poker tarot cards. And this is exactly what he would say. I got a full house and 4 people died. I mean, I would not be, and I don't think it's plagiarizing, right? With Richard Pryor, you know, ever notice how Frank Chicken is like jazz music? It's all about the rhythm and the beat, and if you get it just right, it's a masterpiece. He had another one which was about his girlfriend. I'll leave it at that. Wait, was that earlier? Did we talk about that one? Yeah, okay, so maybe, and then Cat Williams always talks about being a pimp, right? You know what's harder than being a pimp? Trying to explain to your cat that you're the one who pays the rent. The cat looked at me like, you might pay the bills, but this is my house. Okay, that one's not so funny. Oh, here's the fried chicken one. Yeah, I think I did use that before. So anyway, that's the fried chicken one. And since we already did segment 2, we took the whiteboards. We plugged them into the middle of the show. It's not a separate segment, but it was brought to you by this bunny. And we got 7 minutes left, so let's end with some good humor here. But again, training to keep the fuzzy bunny. Now it's in a knight uniform with a dragon. I had to iterate on this some, but it knew the core template. I put a castle in the background, right? And it gave me some ones where, the bunny had like 7 feet or something. Whoop, boop, go back. Where is this? Boom, pen. I spoiled the next one. But what are we going to name this bunny, Tom? You got to come up with one. I'll give you a starter. King something or Sir something.
It's a midget. It's a midget Harvey in a helmet. I'm sorry. Uh, and
Oh, the engineer in you is taking over. So I'm gonna go with Sir Bounce a Lot,
okay.
right? Instead of was it Sir Lancelot? I'm gonna go with Sir Bounce a Lot. That's Sir Bounce a Lot. Or we could go with instead of King Arthur, we could go with King All Fur. All right, that's a pretty good one. I'm making these up on the fly too.
There you go.
And then we can name the dragon, oh, I don't know what we'll name the dragon. Puff, Fluff, Fluff the magic dragon. There we go. Look at that. Man, my wit is on point today. And we're going to dedicate all those whiteboards to big thing of carrots growing on Earth with a view of on the moon with a view of the Earth. Unbelievable what this thing can do if you have the art skills, just like the music skills. You can go onto this and it'll come out with good stuff, and just the precision. You got to learn some stuff to do it. Anyway, if we just boil it down, I think the main thing for this whole chapter is that your customer is going to be interacting with generative AI at scale.
Because you can't afford to do it otherwise.
And that's the bottom line. And the whole organization, the customer journey, the customer experience, it's reinvented. Everything you thought about for customer experience, which is one of my primary theme my whole career, 25 plus years, has been not about generative AI. It's been about AI, but we've never seen this before. That's the boiled down main point. And we got a couple of more funnies. We got 5 minutes left. I feel like we're just having a good time now, which makes it worth it. I hope for people joining us on the show. And please send us questions. We're trying to make this fun, but really educational. What are we going to name this bunny?
You're asking something of me that I can't give.
All right. I'm going to go with Pamela, and now you know where I'm going, right? I
Yeah,
basically was like,
that was my thought. That was my thought initially, and it's just that
who's
it's tough to.
who's some famous person who's on a beach where I can make a funny name up. So I'm going with Pamela. I could go with Bunnyson, right? Instead of Pamela Anderson, I could go with Pamela Furryson. I could go
You're not going in the right direction there.
Anderson, Furryson? No, Bunnyson? Rabbitson? No? None of those work for you?
No, I can't say that it does.
Oh,
I
come
mean,
on.
there's a
What are you gonna
Jessica
name?
Rabbit. There's a Jessica Rabbit quality that I think you're trying to get at as well, but it's
Oh,
yeah.
I don't know. Send in, make comments if you got a better one. I'd love to hear it. And lastly, so this was we put demos all throughout the thing, and our segment's changing up a little bit. We decided like interweaving these things versus separate makes a lot of sense. But I made all the bunnies, so
She did. Yes.
gotta use the graphics. That's part of the charm of the show. And of course, I dedicated it to a golden retriever wearing bunny ears. So the demo was dedicated to a golden retriever. Can you please name this dog?
It's not a puppy mill, it's a bunny mill.
That's not a name.
I know. I just
How
I'm a
about
little
there's a
slow.
famous dog, Lassie, right? How about thoughts? That's a hard one. I'm anyway, all right. Well, let's sign off. The show's been long. Hopefully it's worth it. You know, when I look back on this show, I'm like, this can change people's careers. And if it does that, I'm a happy man. Tom, you got any parting thoughts for anyone that wants to go ask my GPT questions? Here it is. And before we do the peace out, I'm gonna ask you to name this one too. But what are your parting thoughts here on the Popping with Product Marketing, ELG, and Generative Led Growth show? We got minute 45 before we're gonna get cut off.
Okay, that's a Caddyshack gopher with a fro in front of a Woodstock
Yeah.
venue. So
How
yeah,
about how about this is Janice Hoplin.
there you go.
Janice Hoplin. Wow, I
I've been,
scored
I've
big
been,
on that. If somebody
I've
can quote that one better than me, better than that, I want to hear it. Janice Hoplin, be it.
I think you've conditioned us all through this show. By the time this point comes, that we're very accepting of your naming.
All right, everyone. Peace out. Thank you for joining us. Series one, where Tom and I are partnering up. There'll be other series with other guests and different topics. But that's a wrap. And thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you.